After marrying the campus beauty, I treated her with the utmost care and respect. However, she secretly had an abortion without telling me. When we were at the hospital, she leaned on her brother's shoulder, looking at me coldly, and said, "If it weren't for you, I wouldn't have had to miss my brother. Everything that happened is your fault." In the end, to cover everything up, she hired someone to take my life. When I regained consciousness, I found myself back on the very day I proposed to her, her so-called brother, with a detached gaze, handed me a blank check saying, "You either marry her or you take this money, your choice." I gave a small smile, accepted the check politely, both hands grasping it. 20 million. I wish the Game of Thrones relationship everlasting happiness. Long live true love, I thought with bitter sarcasm. He snorted. "You've just graduated? Do you even make 3,000 a month? How dare you think you can marry my sister? You're just a worthless nobody." Hearing his familiar voice again, I forced my eyes open. Elias was looking at me with clear disdain. "When I heard you were going to propose to my sister, I had to admit you had some skills. But unfortunately, birds of a feather flock together," he said mockingly. I looked around, seeing golden and pink balloons celebrating confessions and a "Marry Me" banner hanging high. The engagement ring was still clutched tightly in my hand. In that moment, it hit me. I was reborn. On this same day in my previous life, I proposed to Gloria the same way, only to be humiliated by Elias and eventually forced to leave her. I was blinded by love, and without thinking, rejected everything. It all ended in a miserable death. When Elias saw my lack of response, he impatiently pulled out a check from his jacket and waved it in front of me. "Break up with Gloria. Fill in any amount you want and never see her again. Do you understand?" Gloria, standing beside me, wrapped her arm around mine, showing a bit of defiance but more affection toward Elias. Inside, I couldn't help but sneer. In my previous life, I had foolishly married Gloria and had become just a pawn in their rich family's schemes. This time, I wouldn't let myself be used again. I took the check with satisfaction, nodding while they both stared in shock. A grand president wouldn't go back on his word, right? I mean, I can really put any amount on it? "Of course," Elias sneered. "It's worth paying a little to show Aaliyah what kind of person you are." I didn't even flinch. "All right, I'll accept this great fortune. You're such a good brother. I don't even know how to repay you. Maybe in the next life, if you turn into an ox or a horse, I'll make sure you get grass to eat." Before Elias could respond, I walked straight into the bank nearby with the check. I quickly filled in the amount, looked at the newly credited balance in my account, and smiled to myself. Just as I was enjoying the moment, my phone rang. I answered it, and Elias's voice came through, trembling with anger. 20 million? You actually dared to ask for it. In my past life, marrying Gloria felt like I had struck the lottery. I didn't mind when people said I was living off her family's wealth. It didn't bother me until one day a classmate showed me a few photos. "Is this your wife? Dressed so provocatively, drinking mouth to mouth with some guy? He's practically on top of her." And what came after? They went upstairs to get a room. I was in shock. In the photo, I saw Elias. Every time she went out, she claimed she was just having drinks with girlfriends and that her brother would always be there. But this was the reality. My head felt like it was going to explode. This was pure cheating. I immediately confronted Gloria. She was leaning against Elias's chest, glancing at me dismissively. "He's not my real brother. We have different parents. It's no big deal. Do you want a divorce?" she said nonchalantly. "Marco, know your place. You're just a live-in son-in-law. If you're so foolish, at least look in the mirror to see how ridiculous you are. You really are sick," she mocked. I was shaking with rage. She laughed softly and handed me a piece of paper. "It was an abortion consent form. I'm still young. Of course, I want to enjoy life, so let's feel sorry for your little baby," she added. "But if it weren't for you, I wouldn't have missed my brother. If you hadn't investigated, you could have just turned a blind eye and carried on with your life. Now this is all your fault." Elias, standing next to her, gazed at her with indulgence. "With him as a cover, isn't it easier for us to be together?" At that moment, I realized I had been nothing but a pawn, a fool in their twisted game. I couldn't hold back any longer. I punched Elias. He met my eyes with provocation and waved his hand. Instantly, a group of security guards stormed in and threw me out of the hospital. A few days later, Gloria kicked me out of the company and took all my money. I spent those days thinking about how to get back at them. But then, a truck with faulty brakes came speeding toward me, knocking me unconscious. So why wouldn't I take the 20 million? Not only did I dare to take it, but I also thought it wasn't nearly enough. In my previous life, even though I was a son-in-law to a wealthy family and a general manager of a company, I lived frugally, hardly ever having 5 figures in savings. So now, when Elias called me, his voice dripping with anger, I laughed. "What's wrong, Mr. Elias? Does this little bit of money bother you? Didn't you love to show off in front of Gloria? Honestly, I kind of prefer the arrogant way you handed me the check earlier." "You better have the guts to spend that money," Elias spat, slamming the phone down. Looking at the balance in my bank account, I exhaled deeply and hailed a taxi to the luxury car dealership. Gloria once told me she was afraid I'd change my mind if I had money, so she had me hand over my salary card. I had just closed a multi-million-dollar deal and discussed with Gloria about replacing my old car. But she disagreed, saying it wasn't necessary to be extravagant if the old car still worked. She turned around and bought herself a Ferrari and gave Elias the latest McLaren. I had been so blind. So now the first thing I did was buy a sports car. By chance, I ran into Gloria and Elias at the dealership. Gloria saw me first, smugly saying, "Brother, I told you Marco would regret it. He said he'd never leave me. Look, here he is." Elias sneered, extending his hand toward me. "If you don't have the guts, return the money." I smiled faintly and looked past them to the brand-new black Lamborghini behind them. Its matte finish and sleek body lines were just perfect. I pointed to the car. "This one looks great. Can I take it today?" The saleswoman smiled brightly, swaying her hips as she approached. "You have great taste, boss. This car was already reserved, but the buyer just canceled." She shot a quick glance at Elias, whose face darkened immediately. I quickly pieced everything together. In my past life, after rejecting Elias, he mocked me with these exact words. "Look at your account balance. You could never earn that much in several lifetimes." I distinctly remembered the number at that moment, 20,053 yuan. Now he couldn't even afford a car, but his pride was still unshaken. Taking my 20 million breakup fee and spending it, "Little Lee, look at what kind of boyfriend you've got." Gloria was visibly shocked. 20 million, Marco. Are you out of your mind? Why did you take my brother's money? He was just testing your feelings for me. Stop this nonsense and give it back." I pretended to dig through my pockets, making a show of searching. Elias, seeing this, softened his demeanor, shifting into his usual act. "Oh, it's just 20 million, little Lee? No need to get angry. Spending 20 million to see a scumbag clearly is worth it." I pulled out my bank card and paid for the car in full. The saleswoman even added me on WeChat for future maintenance services. Under their astonished gazes, I drove off in the sports car. That night, Gloria called, saying she was downstairs at my place. I lazily slipped on my slippers and went down. I didn't plan to pay her much attention, but curiosity got the better of me. How would she react, knowing that I had agreed to break up with her for money? Back in school, this campus beauty could make countless men fawn over her with just a simple look. I reached the bottom of the apartment building, and as the evening sky darkened, the drizzle began. A bright yellow umbrella appeared, the raindrops pattering against it. Through the mist, I saw part of her face under the umbrella. Gloria stepped closer, awkwardly tilting the umbrella over my head. She pouted, "Why aren't you here to apologize yet?" I had to admit she was very pretty. At that moment, her eyes were full of tears, her small nose red, and she looked utterly heartbroken. When I didn't respond, she gently grabbed the edge of my shirt. Tears clung to her long lashes, making her look like a pitiful kitten on the verge of tears. "Marco, are you really going to break up with me?" She said this in a voice so whiny that it made my skin crawl. Her fake display of emotions was enough to make me sick. I nodded and said seriously, "Yes, we're breaking up. How can you compare to 20 million? Don't come looking for me again. It'll just make your brother think I took his money. Goodbye." The sorrowful expression on her face instantly disappeared, replaced by a dark scowl. "Give the money back to my brother and marry me. If you marry me, you can have all the money you want. This is your only chance." "Marry your head! Get lost!" I had to stop myself from slapping her as I turned to head back inside. She stood frozen, probably stunned since no one had ever insulted her like that. But she quickly followed me, shameless as always. Just as I was about to close the door, she slipped inside ahead of me, grabbing my arm and pulling me in. Before I knew it, Gloria had me pressed against the wall, wrapping her arms around my neck, her breath warm against my ear. "Punish me. Just give the money back to my brother, and I'll do whatever you want." As she said this, her small hand reached down, skillfully tugging at my shirt. My mind went blank for a moment, and my entire body tensed. Reflexively, I grabbed her wrists with both hands. She instinctively looped her arms around my neck, a playful smile spreading across her face. "Stop being so mean. Be gentle with me." I fought the nausea rising in my throat and leaned in close to her face, my lips stopping just short of her ear. "Will you really do anything I ask?" I asked. She nodded, her slender arm tracing circles on my chest with her fingertips. "Yes, I want to marry you." "Then bark like a dog," I ordered. "What?" She blinked, clearly taken aback. In the next instant, I flipped her over my shoulder, tossing her onto the ground near the door. The door slammed shut with a bang. After a few seconds, Gloria kicked the door violently, her voice sharp with fury. "Marco, how dare you treat me like this? Are you crazy? Fine, you better not regret this." With those harsh words, she fell silent. I began to formulate my next move, buying a house and relocating somewhere they couldn't find me, to escape the harassment of these so-called siblings. I spent late hours browsing houses on my phone when suddenly I heard a noise at the door. A familiar smell filled the air. Gasoline. Elias's sinister face flashed through my mind. Not good. I rushed out the door. A shadowy figure wearing a black hat froze momentarily before dropping a half-filled bottle of gasoline and fleeing. By the time I reached the stairs, they had vanished. I pulled out my phone to call the police, but suddenly, a sharp pain struck the back of my head. The world spun, and I lost consciousness. When I woke up, I was met with the cold splash of water. I found myself facing an elderly man with full white hair. He leaned back in his chair, exuding a cold, hostile air, his eyes filled with aggression as he glared down at me. "You got my daughter pregnant and swindled my godson's money. Who gave you the guts?" His brows were furrowed, and a menacing aura seemed to radiate from him. Around us, the bodyguards stood motionless, their postures stiff and filled with silent threat. Gloria's father, clearly the chairman of a company, carried himself like a mob boss. Wait, had I returned to the moment of the proposal? I hadn't even touched Gloria yet, but here he was, accusing me of getting her pregnant. That meant the child she carried in my previous life wasn't mine at all. It had always been Elias's child. In fear of her father finding out the truth, she had hurriedly married me, hoping to cover for Elias. Then, after losing the child due to their infidelity, I went mad trying to fight back, and it cost me my life. I slapped myself in frustration, remembering the pain of that betrayal. I looked up and locked eyes with him, revealing the truth. I never slept with her. The child she carried was Elias's, and the 20 million was just his breakup fee. If you don't believe me, investigate for yourself. The room fell silent. Despite the air conditioning running, the bodyguards were sweating. Gloria's father sneered, picking up a cigar from the table. I stepped forward to light it for him, being tactful. He bit down on the cigar but didn't light it, narrowing his eyes, his expression unreadable. After a long pause, his deep voice broke the silence. "I'll handle this matter personally," he said, his words dripping with menace. "Disobedient dogs will have their legs broken and their teeth pulled out, staying obediently by my daughter's side." He gave a quick order, and one of the nearest bodyguards bowed before exiting the room. My mind raced, my heart pounding in my chest. Then 20 million? Do you think our family's money is that easy to take? His cold gaze pierced through me, his voice echoing in my ears. You'll take over Elias's responsibilities. I'll give you an identity for appearances. He pulled out a photo from the drawer and placed it in front of me. Deal with this woman and secure a marriage alliance. Divorce is fine afterward, and I won't pursue the 20 million anymore. The woman in the photo had legs that seemed to stretch endlessly. She lounged lazily on a sofa, her eyes radiating a haughty arrogance, as if nothing in the world mattered to her. I recognized her from my previous life. She was the woman Elias had wanted to marry. Rumors said he had used underhanded tactics to secure her, but her family had knocked out a row of his teeth. The marriage alliance failed, and she went abroad to study, gracefully leaving the mess behind. Scared? The chairman sneered. Transfer the money back and leave. My heart tightened. No, she seems hard to get. I'll need more money, I thought. At the company meeting, I stood respectfully beside the chairman, dressed in an expensive, custom-made suit. Elias slumped beside Gloria, his face unreadable. Gloria's eyes blazed with hatred as she shot daggers at me. The room was silent as the chairman announced that Elias was relieved of his duties and that he and Gloria would be engaged, with the wedding date already set. I was to take over Elias's responsibilities and was given the prestigious title of his new godson. It was all irrelevant to me. I just wanted the money and freedom to live life on my terms. But it wasn't that simple. After the meeting, Elias deliberately blocked my path at the door, gritting his teeth. Marco, I really underestimated your tricks. Let's see how long you can keep this up. Who do you think you are? I waved my hand dismissively. Security, take him out of here. Several security guards rushed forward. Elias's face instantly darkened as he shook off the guards' hands, sneering. I should thank you for taking care of Gloria for 3 years in college, you useless coward. Can't you do anything? No wonder Gloria thinks about me every night. Even with your pathetic tricks, she could never fall for you. I find it amusing. Gloria had said she wanted to save her most precious memories for our wedding day, and I respected that. Someone could pretend for 3 years in front of another. It wasn't her acting skills that were so impressive. It was that I had been too blind to see. Elias, with his sickly charm, frail frame, and pale face behind gold-rimmed glasses, had the audacity to mock me. I shrugged, hands in my pockets, a faint smile on my face. Good thing she likes you. You should look great at home in an apron, being a cute house husband. Don't worry. I'll manage the company well and won't disappoint my godfather. So please, just leave. Elias's veins bulged as he clenched his fists and charged at me, aiming for my jaw. The security guard swiftly intervened, and he crashed to the ground. Ah, you bunch of turncoats! I'll fire all of you! Gloria rushed over, helping him up. Brother, what happened? Elias suppressed his anger, adopting a sinister expression, and spoke with a touch of despondency. The new general manager Wang wanted to ask me something, but I didn't expect him to get physical. Never mind. Let's just say I fell by accident. Let's go, Gloria. I don't want to stay here and be humiliated anymore. He weakly rubbed his arm, even the nearby guards rolling their eyes. Yes, a true man can endure setbacks. But Gloria's anger flared. Marco, what are you pretending for? You're nothing but a dog my dad keeps in our house. She glared at me, her voice dripping with disdain. I didn't expect you to be such a scheming dog. Don't worry, you'll pay for hurting my brother. I looked at Elias coldly. Look at your pathetic state. Even a rabbit doesn't eat the grass near its own burrow. Do you think you deserve the chairman's trust? Getting hurt and then blaming others? Are you going to cry for your mommy next? And you, Gloria, I continued. You dare talk about making me pay after cheating on me? Has your brain been licked clean by a dog? The crowd around us grew, the disdain for Elias palpable. The atmosphere turned icy. Gloria frowned, her voice now cold. Marco, you'll regret this. She paused, her gaze piercing. Don't forget my last name. After they left, I felt a sense of unease. Sitting in the luxurious office, everything felt surreal, as if invisible hands were pushing me into an abyss. Having died once, I valued life more than anyone else. I received the chairman's instructions to attend the dinner party, where the first official meeting of the two groups' marriage alliance would be discussed. I understood the importance of this alliance. 1 + 1 would be far greater than 2 in terms of benefits. Summer was approaching, and the air was heavy with humidity. I practiced my expressions in the mirror repeatedly. When I arrived at the banquet hall, the lavish decorations made the scene look like something out of a fairy tale. Money, after all, is another name for power. "Is this your godson? He's really handsome." The voice came from a well-maintained middle-aged woman, though she looked as if she were in her 30s. I nodded politely and walked over to sit next to the chairman. "What's he doing here?" Gloria's voice cut through the room. "Dad, can someone throw him out? He makes me sick just by being here." Elias smirked coldly. "Marco, this isn't a place for someone like you. Get lost and stop embarrassing our family." The chairman's face darkened and he spat out 2 words, "Shut up." Gloria and Elias exchanged confused glances. After a while, the door to the hall opened again, and the sound of high heels echoed through the room. Everyone's eyes were immediately drawn to the woman who entered. She wore a dark blue dress that clung to her curves, and the crystal tassels of her earrings swayed as she moved, drawing attention to her smooth collarbones. Her face was expressionless, yet she exuded an aura that warned others to keep their distance. Elias stood up abruptly, a smile spreading across his face. "Misty Yi, long time no see." She pretended not to hear him and sat directly across from me. At that moment, I couldn't help but enjoy seeing Gloria's slightly awkward expression. How could anyone stand by and watch their fiancé openly flirt with another woman? "Am I the one you're supposed to marry?" she asked, her voice laced with bitterness. "Marriage is supposed to be sacred and beautiful. Without love, it's no different from being locked in prison. I can't accept that." Her stance was firm, and she didn't waste any time. From sitting down to declaring her position and walking away, it took less than a minute. What a woman with conviction. Misty's parents didn't seem at all surprised by the scene. Elias, eager to chase after her, was momentarily held back by his current status. The chairman gave me a knowing look, prompting me to stand up. Misty wasn't walking quickly. The cool breeze outside helped to break the lingering summer heat. She turned to me with a slightly irritated tone. "Why are you following me? Didn't you hear what I said?" I quickened my pace and positioned myself in front of her. Her stunning features seemed even more radiant under the streetlights. She wasn't just a beautiful, ice-cold woman. She was the lifeline I needed. I took a deep breath. "I can give you an irresistible reason. Let's work together." Soon, the news of my marriage to Misty spread across the circle, shattering everyone's perceptions. During this period, I was busy handling the new project contracts, occasionally going on dates with Misty. Though she found these staged outings quite boring, she still cooperated patiently. There was no choice. There were always people following us when we went out. The day we officially announced our engagement, I posted a not-so-intimate wedding photo. To make it look more affectionate, I added a caption, "I want to get drunk with you and declare my love in the most extravagant way." I even tagged her. 2 minutes later, the message had a red exclamation mark next to it, but fortunately, everyone believed it. At least the chairman did, and with the benefit of my previous life's experience, I managed the company's business with ease, earning his approval. But I didn't expect an unexpected visitor in my office. "Try it on. I specially picked this out for you," Gloria said as she pulled out an exquisite Panda Daytona watch from a box, her eyes sparkling. She truly was the real heiress. But in my previous life, all the gifts she gave me after we married were cheap knockoffs. Seeing my cold expression, she eagerly grabbed my arm. "Give me a break, Marco. I kind of miss you." I glanced at her abdomen, and she quickly understood, her eyes reddening slightly. "It's gone," she said quietly. "Marco, why have you suddenly become so heartless toward me?" A tear silently slipped down her cheek. "Tell me, were our 3 years together just a lie? I now understand that my feelings for Elias were just sibling affection. I was wrong. I'll cut ties with him and explain everything to Dad. Do you know seeing you with another woman always makes me feel terrible?" She wiped away her tears and looked at me, full of emotion. "Can we get back together? Once, even a slight frown from Gloria would have made me nervous, let alone seeing her shed tears. But now, I simply shook my head. Believing her again would be as foolish as eating dirt. She wrapped her arms around my back, pressing her face gently against me. It was revolting. I wanted to turn and push her away, but she clung to me tighter, murmuring, "Just 1 minute." The glass door opened and Elias walked in, his eyes red with anger. "Gloria, what do you mean by this?" Elias stood there, his mood dark. "Marco, you're seducing her. Disgusting pretty boy." Gloria slapped Elias hard, then pulled out a thick stack of photos from her bag, throwing them in his face. The colorful, scandalous photos scattered across the floor, each one depicting Elias with different women in intimate moments. He had played hard. No wonder he looked so haggard. Elias picked up the photos, his eyes flashing with fear. He then turned his gaze on me. "Did you set me up?" I couldn't help but smirk. The cheating I faced in my previous life was disgusting, but this? The betrayal was on a whole new level. Gloria sneered at him. "Then what about the red marks on your neck? Mosquito bites? Do you think I'm a fool?" Elias grabbed her, unwilling to let go. "I don't believe it, Gloria. You clearly said I'm the one you love most. You should trust me." I quietly slipped out of the office, no longer caring about their childish tug-of-war. Gloria had never truly loved anyone. What she loved was the feeling of being adored. When I reached the parking lot, I received 2 messages. One was from Gloria. "Marco, I was blind before, but can you not marry Misty? Give me more time and I will make you fall in love with me again." I swiped left and deleted the message. The other message was from Misty. "Did you like the gift I sent you? Let's start the action. I don't like waiting." It turned out those photos were taken by someone hired by Misty. No wonder she had such intense hatred for Elias in my previous life. A few days later, I went to the chairman's office with a contract for him to sign. He was reading a book, and I didn't want to disturb him. I made him a cup of tea and stood by his side, waiting. I waited the entire afternoon. The sky outside had darkened, but he didn't lift his eyes once. Finally, he took a sip of tea and spoke. "You've done well. I was planning to give you your freedom soon, but yesterday my daughter told me she will marry no one but you." She cried and made such a fuss that it gave me a headache. "What do you think I should do?" From that sentence, I understood his intentions. He leaned back in his chair, savoring his tea. "You and she were together for 3 years in college. I saw how good you were to her. So what if she dated Elias or other men? It's normal for young girls to play around. Besides, I can tell you're different from those other men. I only have one daughter. After you divorce Misty, stay by her side. I'll let you manage the company. Doesn't the idea of rising to the top sound appealing?" "I can't be with Gloria," I said calmly, standing up straight. His expression shifted slightly. "It's normal for young people to have tempers, but you only have one life." Faced with this blatant threat, I wasn't surprised at all. "What do you take me for?" "She'll just drag me back into hell," I muttered bitterly. "If I'm going to marry, I'd rather choose the person who waits for me at home with the lights on, not the one who will betray me." The chairman remained silent. With a tired sigh, he signed the contract and handed it to me, signaling for me to leave. I gripped the contract tightly and rushed out of the office, heading toward the elevator. As the doors began to close, I saw Gloria running toward me, clearly wanting to speak. But thankfully, I pressed the close button furiously, about 80 times in 1 second. Misty's red sports car was parked downstairs, and I quickly made my way toward it. Behind me, I could hear a group of men with baseball bats emerging, their faces twisted in malice. I jumped into the car and urged Misty to start the engine immediately. As she hesitated, the window shattered with a loud crash. I instinctively blocked it with my hand, wincing as shards of glass embedded themselves in my flesh. Misty finally snapped out of her hesitation, slammed her foot on the gas, and we sped off. I tossed my phone out of the bag, quickly typing, "The contract is signed, and he's showing signs of illness." The car eventually stopped at a gas station along the coastal highway. I handed the contract to Misty, and we discussed our next steps. We were gradually working to bring the Yee family into play, slowly taking over the Lee family's assets. If I hadn't spent so much time managing the company in my previous life, none of this would have been possible. Misty adjusted her hair, tucking it behind her ear, and looked at me thoughtfully. "You really are ruthless. Is his Alzheimer's disease that serious?" I stared out into the distance, answering quietly, "Yes." "After this, it might get worse," she said softly, her voice tinged with concern. After all, he was the one who first thought of killing me. That day in the office when he asked me to replace Elias, I could see it in his eyes. He had murder on his mind. He wouldn't have planted something on my phone and monitored me 24/7 otherwise. If I had truly married Misty, I would have died somewhere, unexpectedly, just like that. How could I trust an outsider? Even now, after I contradicted him a few times, he sent people after me. A man like him couldn't tolerate even the smallest annoyance. I pulled out my backup phone and checked my account balance, letting out a long sigh. This money had been hard-earned. Misty glanced at me and smiled. "Not bad. Looks like you're a multimillionaire now." It was rare for her to joke, and I smiled a little, though it was more out of bitterness. I'm just getting back what I worked for. According to our agreement, Misty would send me abroad next. This was both for my protection and because she needed time to devour the Lee family's assets fully. I learned from Misty that the Lee family had done many terrible things in the past to build their wealth. Suddenly, a shooting star streaked across the sky, and I stepped out of the car to admire the sight. Misty seemed to notice too and got out of the car as well. As we watched the meteor pass by, I heard the roar of a car engine. Turning around, I saw a black car speeding toward us. Through the windshield, I recognized Elias's furious face. Without thinking, I threw myself at Misty, pulling her to the ground as we rolled several times, landing outside the road barrier. The sports car was struck by Elias and flipped over the slope, tumbling into the sea below. Bloodied and crazed, Elias crawled out of the wreckage, a twisted smile on his face. He ran toward the edge of the cliff, laughing maniacally. "Ha ha 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 ha! Serves you right! You and Gloria can meet in hell!" A chill ran through me. Misty broke free from my hold and stood up, running toward Elias. I immediately realized the danger and followed quickly. Elias, now completely unhinged, stood there like a madman. Misty's voice was cold as ice. "My car!" Before I could stop her, she leaped into the air, her long legs sweeping down and landing hard on Elias's face. I was momentarily stunned. Wow, she's skilled. Elias, unable to fight back, was kicked repeatedly. I rushed over and pulled Misty back. "Stop! If you keep beating him, he'll die. Wouldn't it be better to keep him alive? Make him contribute to society instead? Death would be too easy for him." Misty paused, the air around us tense for a few moments. Finally, she turned to me with a cold gaze. "How long are you going to hold me?" I quickly let go and coughed lightly to mask my discomfort. A faint blush crept up on Misty's ears. Soon, the police arrived and took Elias away. He was not only guilty of attacking us, but also attempting to kill Gloria. However, Gloria had jumped from a window, breaking both her legs, but somehow surviving. When her father heard the news, his condition worsened dramatically. When he visited her, he couldn't even remember his own name. After a few days in the hospital, Gloria recovered enough to send me numerous messages asking to see me, but I didn't go. There was nothing left to see, nothing more to say between us. She sent me a lengthy message, which boiled down to 4 simple words. Loved, regretted. Surprisingly, she claimed to have dreamed that we had gotten married. I spent every day trying to make you happy, eating together, shopping, watching movies. I was so happy, and I realized falling for Elias was the worst mistake I ever made. I thought about it for a moment, but didn't respond. As I prepared to board the plane, I put on my headphones and sent a message to Misty. Roaming the world alone can be lonely. How about finding someone to share it with? To my surprise, the red exclamation mark disappeared almost immediately. My heart skipped a beat. She replied quickly with a single word. Get lost. I shrugged, boarded the plane and sat down, plugging my headphones in. The familiar scent of perfume wafted into my nose. I opened my eyes and found Misty sitting beside me. She glanced out the window casually and said, I'm going abroad for a few years to study. But I distinctly remembered that in my previous life she hadn't gone to the country I was headed to. I smiled knowingly. When I first met you, I thought you were my lifeline, but you weren't. What? She asked, her eyebrows raising slightly. I shook my head, not finishing the thought. In this long and hasty world, take your time, wait patiently, and look forward to things slowly. The road ahead is long, and gentle things are bound to happen.